Hi, and thanks for watching this message video. And don't forget to go through the life lesson that goes with it. And for those who can't make a Sunday, don't forget that there's a podcast of that sermon that goes along with this message video and life lesson, kind of a part one, part two thing. Today, we're continuing on in our series called Give Thanks to God, where we're looking at 5 different ways that we can routinely and naturally give thanks to God, and in the process, please Him, bring fame to His name, and change our hearts or our attitudes in the process. So today, we're going to be thanking God, or looking at what it means to thank God for creating and sustaining all things, everything. Or in other words, giving God the praise and the glory for creating everything, rather than the assertion or giving into the assertion that everything that was created through an evolutionary process. Now, even though the teachings of evolution are relatively new, the proponents of those who push evolution, that attitude is not new. In fact, since people have walked the earth, many have refused to acknowledge the obvious signs of an intelligent designer and have instead embraced preposterous ideas of how all things have come into existence. For example, look at what it is that the Apostle Paul says to the people of the churches in Rome about the kinds of attitudes that those people who dismiss God have, and what God thinks of their attitudes. Romans 1:18 through 23. But God shows his anger from heaven against all sinful, wicked people who suppress the truth by their wickedness. They know the truth about God because he has made it obvious to them. For ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and sky. Through everything God made, they can clearly see his invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature. So they have no excuse for not knowing God. Yes, they knew God, but they wouldn't worship him as God or even give him thanks. And they began to think of foolish ideas of what God was like. As a result, their minds became dark and confused. Claiming to be wise, they instead became utter fools. And instead of worshiping the glorious ever-living God, they worshipped idols made to look like mere people and birds and animals and reptiles. When someone refuses to worship God and give him thanks for creating and sustaining all things, like Paul said, inevitably what ends up happening is they come up with foolish ideas about how everything came into existence. And so, yeah, it is a good idea from a research standpoint to look at some creation science stuff or other things that point out creation. However, perhaps the best way to engage in conversations with those who embrace foolish ideas about creation is to simply praise and thank God for being the one who made everything while in their presence. For example, maybe you remember in the first sermon of this series, we read the entire 136th Psalm, all of it, which was dedicated to you and I learning how God's faithful love endures forever, but also how we were supposed to give him thanks for all kinds of different things. And also, I read a portion of Chronicles, which again was kind of a recap for all of the Hebrews about the things that they were supposed to do and about their history. And one of those things was to give thanks to God. And why? For lots of different reasons, but mainly to make him known, to make him famous, and to help change attitudes. Here is a little snigger, or a tiny little portion of both of those passages again. And remember, look at what it is that it says about God's creation. Psalm 136, 5 through 9. Give thanks to him who made the heavens so skillfully. His faithful love endures forever. Give thanks to him who placed the earth among the waters. His faithful love endures forever. Give thanks to him who made the heavenly lights. His faithful love endures forever. The sun to rule the day. His faithful love endures forever. And the moon and stars to rule the night. His faithful love endures forever. 1 Chronicles 16, 8 through 10. Give thanks to the Lord and proclaim his greatness. Let the whole world know what he has done. Sing to him. Yes, sing his praises. Tell everyone about his wonderful deeds. Exult in his holy name. Rejoice, you who worship the Lord. Regardless of how our thankfulness might impact others or bring fame to God's name by talking about all the things that he has done, or we believe that he has done, this changes our attitudes. Even if they reject it, even if they don't believe it, this changes our perspective about God, because what we're doing is we're putting our focus on the magnificent power of God and onto hopefully some very specific details that testify that there is an intelligent designer who is the one who created all of these things. For instance, take a look at some of the details about creation that were told in Psalm 19, and then also take a look at some just general scientific statements that are known, and therefore everybody should understand these principles. Psalm 19, 1 through 4. The heavens proclaim the glory of God. The skies display his craftsmanship. Day after day they continue to speak. Night after night they make him known. They speak without a sound or word. Their voice is never heard. Yet their message has gone throughout the earth, and their words to all the world. God has made a home in the heavens for the sun. If our Earth moved to a closer orbit around the sun, temperatures would rise significantly, causing glaciers to melt and oceans to expand, making the planet uninhabitable over time. If the orbit shifted farther from the sun, our Earth would enter an ice age, oceans would freeze, and the planet would become progressively colder and darker, leading to an uninhabitable Earth. However, a sudden loss of orbit around the sun is not possible. The forces required would be enormous, far exceeding anything in our solar system. When it comes right down to it, the truth is, it's impossible for science to explain where the power to establish our elaborate universe came from without admitting its power source is beyond the reach of science to measure or identify. Therefore, the most logical conclusion is not the Big Bang Theory or that a force within our solar system created a spontaneous and cosmic explosion that catapulted all life into existence through billions of years. No. The most logical conclusion is what the Genesis account tells us, in that God actually intentionally designed and created the universe and all of our earth for the very specific purpose of enjoying a relationship with us, people, humanity. And as science has observed, we as humanity, if you've read that Genesis story, are completely different from every other created thing. And the reason why is because we have the image of God within us. We're special. We're different. We've been created. Our body is uniquely different from every other thing. Here's what we're told. Genesis 1, 26 and 27. Then God said, "Let us make human beings in our image to be like us. They will reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, the livestock, all the wild animals on the earth, and the small animals that scurry along the ground." So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. Animals are obviously very important to God, and they should be important to us, and we have a responsibility to care for them. But there's no way that animals and human beings should be compared on the same plane. Therefore, when it comes to showing compassion, we should remember that. Furthermore, when it comes to the creation of animals, I can assure you that God's thoughts and the process that he went through to create them, there's not as much thought given to them as what is given to us. And I guarantee that the process of that intimate creation wasn't as enjoyable for him as it was in creating us. For instance, look at what David said. Psalm 139, 13 through 18. "You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion, as I was woven together in the dark of the womb. You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. How precious are your thoughts about me, O God. They cannot be numbered. I can't even count them. They outnumber the grains of sand. And when I wake up, you are still with me." God deserves to be thanked for so many things, but one of the things that we should regularly thank God for is creating and sustaining everything. In fact, the prophet Isaiah literally quotes God as saying, I am the first and the last. There is no other God. Who is like me? Let him step forward and prove to you his power. Then God goes on to say, I am the Lord who made all things. I alone stretched out the heavens. Who was with me when I made the earth? Clearly, God wants the credit for creating everything in our universe, everything in our solar system, everything in and on our earth, and even our own bodies. And when we praise and thank God for this, it not only pleases him, it not only has the potential to make him famous or change somebody else's perspective toward God, but it changes our hearts and our attitudes, because now we're focusing on the magnificent power of God. However, the truth is, there are many Christians who, because of fear perhaps, or confusion about the assertions of evolutionists, they stay silent. They don't praise and thank God for creation, and as a result, he's not pleased, they're not changed, and nobody is potentially now coming to know the great things about God and what it is that he's done, like we're supposed to be proclaiming. And what's even worse is that some Christians, rather than praising and thanking God for the beauty that he has made within them and their bodies, some people have actually come to idolize that beauty rather than thanking God for it. And even worse, some distort that beauty altogether while claiming to be Christians. This is so important. It's what I'm going to be talking about on Sunday, and I hope you can join me.